So today I'm going to be looking at my research into earth energies and the sort of more esoteric aspect of those and the potential of it being a global phenomenon, and also the scientific aspect of it as well, which is something that Freddie mentioned last night on Friday, the work of John Burke, but also the work of people like Philip Callahan, Alana Moore and others who've been doing a lot of tests with these energies, especially to do with megalithic sites all around the planet. And so there's a lot to get through in this next hour. So first of all, though, I'd like to sort of dedicate this to John Michel. And well, actually, to be honest with you, there's quite a few people who I'd like to dedicate this to. John Michel, Hamish Miller, our good friend John Agnew, and John Burke, who I'm very inspired by, Michael Poinder, amongst others, who have been doing some incredible research with the ancient sites over the last few decades. So this is for them. And I'd like to read you this quote. This is paraphrased from The View Over Atlantis by John Michel. And this really kind of sums it up. I mean, this was actually written, in the late 60s, but it really is relevant today with the way we still perceive and need to explore these ancient sites. A great scientific instrument lies sprawled over the entire surface of the globe. At some period, perhaps it was over 4,000 years ago, almost every corner of the world was visited by a group of men who came with a particular task to accomplish. With the help of some remarkable power by which they could cut and raise enormous blocks of stone, these men erected vast astronomical instruments, circles of erect pillars, pyramids, underground tunnels, cyclopean alignments, whose course from horizon to horizon was marked by stones, mounds and earthworks. The vast scale of prehistoric engineering is not yet generally recognised. And that was from the classic book, The View Over Atlantis by John Michel, which I highly recommend everyone gets a copy of. So this is like a menu of what we're going to go through in this next hour. We're going to be looking at geomagnetism, lines of force, the theories of John Burke briefly, because I think these are possibly the most important breakthroughs in the megalithic arts and sciences over the last few years. A brief outline of some of the earth grid theories, and also the gods who brought civilization, which Freddie touched on yesterday. But I'm going to be focusing on certain groups who follow this particular earth energy current around the world. And as we go through, we'll realize that the renaissance in this earth mysteries and earth energies discoveries that are really happening now is just really what was happening in the golden age several thousand years ago. We seem to be coming back round full circle to this high level knowledge and sophistication of our ancestors. So we really are going to ask the question, what were the ancients really up to? And see if we can get some answers by the end of this talk. First of all, there's the earth we have to consider, obviously, or Gaia. And Gaia is obviously alive, as we've seen through Tor's film and some of the other lectures this weekend. We know that she has energy around, she even has chakra points with the rainbow serpent energies. But I'm very interested in earth energies and how they relate to us, the surface of the earth and the ionosphere. And this is something that John Burke has done a lot of research on, but before him there was Philip Callahan and Alana Moore. And going back in the 80s and 90s in England, we had the Dragon Project, which was run by Paul Devereux and other researchers. And there's a lot of research now being compiled and put together, and it has a very scientific edge to it nowadays, which has never really been there before. It was all in the hands of geomancers and dowsers, which is what I do personally, and I've been trained in by my good friend Sean Kerwin. But you often get ridiculed when you walk about with coat hangers in your hand at ancient sites, as Freddie pointed out yesterday. But actually, that is one of the most beautiful and delicate tools you can have to work out where these energies are at these sites. I think it's very important that dowsing kind of tunes you in as well. If you're like a blunt object like I am, they help tune you in to actually feel the energies, because you sort of need something to give you some guidance, and they actually tune you in and allow you to sort of notice your inner senses. And eventually you don't need dowsing rods at all, you just feel it within your body and your energetic body. And so these earth energies are what we feel with these rods and what we feel with our body. And so we have to work out what these are. And as we've heard over the last couple of days, the telluric lines are possibly the most interesting ones for me, because they're everywhere all over the planet. They're attached to the magnetic field. They surge at dawn and relax at night. bit like we do, I guess. Well, I'm not exactly surge at dawn. But we have to sort of look at this as why these sites were built as well. And we'll go through some of the theories about the effects these energies have on these sites and the effects that these sites actually manipulate naturally from the earth energies themselves. But it does seem like at dawn and at the early hours of the day, or just as the sun's starting to rise, that the energies are the strongest. And this is something that Burke and others have noted over the decades. And when you start realizing the alignments that some of these sites have as well, with the stars and the sun and the moon, you realize that many of them do face towards the rising sun, and that's often the entrance to the sites. Now obviously that fluctuates and changes throughout the year, and so that is a clue as to why these sites were built. This just shows you a basic magnetic map, really, the flow lines of the planet. It just gives you some idea of the chaotic nature of what we're dealing with here. And these energies do appear to be very chaotic, but once you know where they are, which is something that Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst obviously done with the Michael and Mary lines, you realise that they can be worked with, and that it seems like in ancient times these energies were kind of harnessed and sort of pinned down into the landscape with megalithic stones and pyramids and shaping the earth itself, which is something that is still done to this day in the Far East, in China, with the art of Feng Shui. If we zoom right in here, these are just a couple of examples that I got from John Burke's book, Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty. And it just shows you the magnetic field strength of a particular site. The one on the left there is actually one of the chambers we're going to go and have a look at over the next few days. I don't know if you can read which one it is exactly. Yes, one of the chambers at Kent Cliffs in New York State. Hopefully we're going to be going to visit that one. And that's actually built upon a negative magnetic anomaly, as many of these sites are, if not all of them, or some kind of anomaly, whether it's gravitational, magnetic, electric sort of anomaly. There's certainly a lot of these sites seem to be built upon these, and they were sort of harnessing that energy. And this just shows you the magnetic strength around that from these field lines. And on the right-hand side there, you can see the white area within Stonehenge. The central part here is the main stone circle, and the outer larger circle is the henge that goes around the edge. And on the top right corner there, you can see where it's the only real entrance into the site. And this is where these telluric energies flow into the site effortlessly, because the henge around the edge is over 3 feet deep. So whenever any energy kind of gets attracted to it, or the stones, it will hit that, and it can't go any lower than 3 feet into the ground, these particular types of energies. So it follows the path of least resistance until it reaches a bit where it can cut through when it's a flat kind of level surface, and it will just go through into the middle. And this is something that's been noted in England especially, and a lot of the mound culture sites, I would imagine, in North America as well, where these particular sites are built so they manipulate and harness the natural subtle energies of the surrounding landscape and of the magnetic field. And this is something we're only just starting to learn again today, and so it's really hard for people to take this kind of information in and kind of accept it as is. But the more data that comes up and the more people research this, the more evidence there is to suggest that they were working with these energies. There's also the geological aspect of where these sites are built. Something again that was noted in John Burke's book, Freddie mentioned it yesterday, is something called a conductivity discontinuity, where many ancient sites seem to be built where two different types of geology kind of meet. And where these flow lines, these energy lines, move through that site, they either switch from magnetic to electric charge, or electric charge to magnetic, and fluctuate. And often you get balls of light appear when there's sudden rise in electric charge and drop in magnetism, and vice versa. And so all these orbs and balls of light that are being photographed, it's not just your digital camera doing it. There's something else going on there, which has been filmed, photographed and witnessed, and photographed not necessarily by digital cameras way before they even existed. So there's certainly something going on with these sites. And you get a similar thing happening in Avebury as well, where what was noted by Burke and others is that around the stones, there's a huge ring of stones at Avebury in Wiltshire in England, 99 or 100 large stones in the main stone circle, which is so large they managed to build a village inside of it, and several main roads going through it. But what they noted when they did tests on the stones, the magnetic norths and souths of the stones were aligned to the next stone in the circle. It's almost precisely as though they were kind of going around in a circle, aligning them up magnetically. Now to do that by chance would be virtually impossible. It just wouldn't happen. So they obviously knew what they were doing, and they had an understanding of the magnetic nature of the rocks. Now that itself is a proof of high-level sophistication in the construction of these sites. And also just moving these stones around at all suggests a high-level sophistication, because it's almost impossible to do that today. Here's a photo of balanced rock. We're going to go here tomorrow. This is possibly the largest dolmen in the Americas, with a potentially 90-ton capstone on it. I've got some other photos in a moment as well. But this was taken with a standard camera, not a digital camera, and you can see the orbs that appeared in it. This is particularly interesting. So I went here a few years ago when I was here last time, and got I got a few orb photographs I'll show you in a moment. But it's right on top of a major negative magnetic anomaly. And so this is obviously put there deliberately. But when you go there and we see the sign up next to it, it will say it's a glacial erratic that landed neatly on these 4 or 5 quartzite rocks that support it. Neither the quartzite nor the type of rock that the main stone is made from is from the local area, and it must have been transported hundreds of miles. But this is just the way, obviously, this is the sort of classic thing you get in New England and in other parts of the world, where the archaeologists cannot accept that the ancients could have moved such stones and done such feats. On the bottom left there is the top of the Lost World Pyramid in Tikal, which is the oldest pyramid there. And we'll come back to some of the sites in Mexico and Guatemala briefly later on in the talk, and also something that John Major Jenkins will obviously be looking at tonight or later this afternoon. On the right-hand side here is a plasma band that was photographed in one of the chambers in Putnam County, probably in Kent Cliffs, where we're going to be going. This was actually photographed again using a standard camera, not a digital camera. And this is the book I really highly recommend people get. This has been mentioned a few times this weekend. I think this is one of the breakthroughs, if not the breakthrough of the last decade in megalithic science, and it really needs to be read by everybody who's into these subjects. This just shows you the magnetic anomaly, actually at Balanced Rock, and you can see it's almost like having a great ball of iron 10 feet below the ground, right underneath where the dolmen is. And you can see, you know, how it kind of affects the magnetic energy there, and it's pretty powerful. We went there, and you know, you actually get slightly magnetized towards it. You almost don't want to leave. And so when we all go there, there's going to be like 25 of us hanging about this dolmen on outside a fire station on a main road. It's going to be quite interesting what the locals think of that. But this is a photograph that my friend Larry Boland took when we were here last time. It's raining, so that could be a rain spot, that orb. But he took lots and lots of photos to test this, all different angles, and this one sort of came out with this great big orb on it. But it shows you the size of the dolmen there, doesn't it? I mean, that is magnificent. This is possibly, I mean, if that's 90 tons, that is definitely the largest one in the Americas. It's possibly one of the largest ones in the world. To have that just down the road from here is pretty amazing. It sort of shocked me somewhat. And also the distances between the stones at the bottom there, the quartzite boulders, are all subdivisions of the megalithic yard of 2.72 feet. So that suggests it's not by chance as well. Here's just a couple of shots of the Kent Cliffs chamber. I caught an orb in the top left corner there, of the one on the left. You can see that. This is just, this is pretty dangerous, because you kind of you go inside that chamber, you step out in a sort of slight daze, and that's it. That's the last one you're going to see. So be careful. We need to get sort of a a lollipop man or something. Maybe Freddie can do that. Yeah. And and this is the chamber in the Neshoba Hill. Have any of you been up that way to the Neshoba? I think it's around the Boston area. I can't remember. It's a few years ago. I went up there with a guy called Dan Budillion, who's part of the NERA group, and we were just taking a few photos and checking it out. Look, it's right next to the road. It's actually got a bus stop right next to it, and I think a lot of people got a bit confused and thought this was the bus stop. But again, you can see the orb, and the orbs always, the real kind of orbs, not just the sort of bits of dust, seem to appear right in the entrance to these chambers. And it's usually at the entrance where the magnetic anomaly is, and that is the sort of power place, which can then be used for various purposes, which we'll look at very soon. This is another one. This is one of the ones in Kent Cliffs. I can't remember which one it is exactly. You can see two orbs in there, right inside the entrance to the chamber. I think this is one down Highway 301, which we're going to hopefully have a look at tomorrow. There's quite a few we've got potentially we can look at. But I just thought I'd show you these just to get you slightly excited about the possibility of seeing these chambers in the next few days. And this is often, you often get magnetite. There's a whole magnetite area around Ninham Mountain, Ninham State Park and Kent Cliffs area. And so you get magnetic anomalies there, particularly because of just the magnetite. And they've actually built, some of the rocks inside the chamber themselves are actually magnetite rocks, and just pure strips of it. They've actually built in deliberately to kind of create this kind of energetic charge there. So we can check some of that out with the equipment we have with us tomorrow. This is Gunji Womp. We're going to be going here on a Wednesday. Here's just some photographs. I've not been here yet, so I'm very excited about this. This is the sort of mini stone circle that's there. And this is just, again, we have some of the orb photographs from there, which have been caught by various people, which I thought was particularly interesting. There's a particularly interesting spot there called the Hill of Tears, which I want to have a look at, because apparently if you go up there and to this particular ridge, I think, most people start crying, which is kind of interesting. It has this sort of profound effect on something in your body, your energetic body, which sort of forces you to cry almost. Or people have these very odd reactions there. And there's a lot of energies there. And we're going to take some dowsing rods up there and see what we can find, see if there's anything to back this up. So before we get into the science of what these energies may be, I want to have a quick look at some of the, just one slide on it really, have a quick look at some of the legends and folklore, because in England and in Britain and Ireland and probably most of the world really, we have a tradition that goes way back of fairies and elves and lights in the sky and various different phenomena, which was often seen by peoples going back thousands of years. And these kind of became recorded as little elemental beings with various different names that I've already mentioned. Will-o'-the-wisps is one of the more popular ones in England. And this seems to, the reason why we can't really see these now, we don't really see these with our naked eye anymore, is because there's so much light pollution. There's people driving everywhere, there's planes in the sky, there's street lamps, house lights, there's always light everywhere unless you're in the middle of the wilderness and there's definitely nothing about. And so we rarely get the chance to actually see these with the naked eye, but in going back just 100 or 150 years, you could do that, thousands of years before that. You would see things with the naked eye, and you could probably sit there for hours and watch them, and often these lights move intelligently around. This is something to do that's come up with the crop circles as well, even the fact that these actually make the crop circles. So people gave names to them and gave them sort of identities as such, the sprites, the fairies, the will-o'-the-wisps, etc. And so, but there's more to these energies that meets with the scientific world we now live in. These kind of lights and energies have now been analysed to quite a high degree, and many of them do appear to be related to the geology and the ancient sites as well. They seem to be harnessing these particular elemental energies. So what's really interesting for me is, because I've studied nutrition in the past, it's one of my passions, is studying naturopathic nutrition and things like this, is how we can get the most out of our food, how we can get the most health from our food on many different levels, not just nutrition, but the energetic nature of the foods as well. So when I came across this, it kind of blew me away. It really did move me somewhat that this had actually been tested. There had been tests already done before John Burke had done his Seed of Knowledge research, by a woman called Alana Moore from Australia. They did several, hundreds of tests really, on various farms across the landscape in certain parts of Australia. And what they did there was, before we get into this, what they did there was they experimented. They made these very small stone circles, just a few feet wide, maybe 6, 7 stones in, spread them out all over the farm, just lots of them everywhere. And just those with a certain type of rock, I think it was basalt rock they used, which is like a magnetic volcanic rock, which a lot of the megalithic sites are made of. And what happened was, within the first 6 months, all the telluric energies and natural earth energies of the whole farm reorganized themselves and connected up between all these mini stone circles. And everything started growing better, the energy was better, the bugs didn't come, everything just worked and grew, it was stronger, it was faster, etc. And they did dowsing before and after to test what the differences were, and they were absolutely incredible. So that just by doing that alone, I find particularly interesting, especially when you consider if you enlarge these small stone circles to a huge size like you get in England and put it over the whole country, the same thing could happen. You have this whole fertile landscape of energy, this enchanting energy which not only affects the crops, what's growing on it, the animals, but also affects us and the general energy of the area, which is what John Michel called the enchantment of the landscape. So these are the tests that were carried out by John Burke and his team. They were part of the BLT research team with Nancy Tolbert and Levengood as well. On the top left there, these were some certain types of corn that would have been used in ancient times, the blue corn, and they put it inside one of the chambers. I think it was one of the ones in Kent Cliffs. And they put it in for different amounts of time, maybe an hour, 2 hours, and some of them, they burnt, the seeds got burnt out and they couldn't be used. Other ones, they weren't charged enough. But they realised when he did it for 75 minutes inside this particular rock chamber and put it where we saw the orb photographed, and then when you go and plant them, and then you plant the ones you've put inside the chamber, and then you plant controls which haven't been inside the chamber. This is the difference in yield they got. On the top left there, they got like a 3-fold increase in yield, improved growth rate, slightly larger and frost resistant and almost bug resistant as well. So just by building one of these chambers, you can have a have quite a lot of energy there that you can work with. And so this is something that particularly interested me. And also they did some tests down here at the Lost World Pyramid in Titicaca and found similar results. They find that the flat top pyramids seem to work effectively like that. And they can kind of build up the energy up the sides of the pyramid and sort of circulate on top. They noticed the later pyramids at Tikal, because the Lost World one is the oldest one at Tikal in Guatemala. The later pyramids, these ones on the top right there, don't work. There's no energy there. There's nothing going on. They were political. They were like to do with the kings of the area, and they were built there for, you know, to look good and all this kind of stuff. Whereas the older ones were built as a technology, a fertility technology. And so I find that particularly interesting, and they've done hundreds of tests at sites all around the world and got the same results, often a 3-fold increase in yield and stronger crops. And what's particularly interesting is that they still work. I mean, what technology now, today, is going to work in 2,000 or 3,000 years' time? There's not many. I don't think that projector's going to last, for instance. It might last till tonight if we're lucky. But anyway, so this is the point. This is the sort of point we've got here. They were building these sites to last. Obviously, when you use stones that big, they're going to last for a very long time. And it's going to be hard for anyone to move them. And we now know probably they were built by the giants. Who knows? But anyway, we're not going to get into who built them and how they were built. That's a whole other thing we're not going to have a chance to look at. But I just wanted to bring these sort of ideas into your consciousness here, because they were built with compassion in mind. They were built for future generations. They were built to last, and they knew they worked. And this technology was shared all around the world, and there's evidence of that. There's evidence that it wasn't just here. It was happening in Britain. It was happening in France. It was happening on a global scale, suggesting this technology was a shared technology, and they weren't trying to keep it in the elite. So here's just some clues here, because these telluric energies, as we'll see when we do a bit of dowsing over the next couple of days, we're going to realise that they kind of move around in spirals, and this spiral symbolism is everywhere, all over the world. On the top left, obviously, and on the left there, you've got it in Newgrange. In the middle, again, these are some stone spheres that were found in northern Scotland, Ireland, other parts of northern Europe, perfectly carved out of granite and basalt. This is the one in Malta, these spirals. I went to see this. There's also, you get them in Bolivia, in Tiwanaku, which we're going to go and have a look at in a couple of weeks. Up in the Orkneys, France, everywhere. There's even one being found near Cambridge, where I'm from, in England, recently. So this was like the symbolism of the peoples who shared this technology. And we have to ask the question, who were they? We'll get onto that soon. Here's just some examples of some dolmens in this area in New England. These black and white ones were taken from Men-an-Tol, the Mather and Dick's book, which is absolutely essential reading if you're into the landscape out here. And that's the one in Massachusetts, up on the left at Lynn, Massachusetts. I'm not sure if it's still there. And there's one down here from Minnesota, in fact. And on the bottom left there, I can't remember exactly where that one's from, around, I think it's up near Neshoba Hill. But there's just a quote from Men-an-Tol. I really highly recommend you have a look at that book if you haven't already. And it just clearly states that they were obviously extremely structurally similar to other ones around the world. And the same designs, the same technology. I mean, I don't think it's just by chance that you move massive rocks onto smaller rocks just for a laugh. You wouldn't do that. It's a hell of a job. But this is all around the world. There's similar designs of like 3 or 4 blocks with a massive one on top. And what it does, it creates this piezoelectrical effect with the quartz that's in the rock. So you get this constant charge. It just goes on forever, basically. It doesn't stop because of the sheer weight of the top, the large stone on top. So you've got a constant energy thing, a current of energy always happening. Plus you have the conductivity discontinuity, which is underneath, in the bedrock, in the geology. Plus you have underground water, which creates electric charge. You have these telluric lines that surge in the mornings and drop off at night, and they fluctuate according to the different lunar and solar cycles, and even the star cycles sometimes. And so there's a lot of energy going on, and if you know how to harness it, you can get 3 times as much food. It's quite good. It's quite a good technology, and there's other implications of healing and health and strength, because fertility is like a healing energy as well, and it can affect us humans. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, I believe. I think it's a very important aspect that needs to be reconsidered. Here's some other dolmens just from different parts of the world. I've just got some photos of. I've seen them all over the place. I mean, the one, for example, there's 19,000 dolmens in Korea. That's quite a few. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really, when we start looking around the world. There's probably millions across the whole planet, because they were the simplest fertility technology you could create using basic stones. And so I believe that was the shared knowledge of the ancients. You also get, in Ireland, you get these towers, these round towers, and not dissimilar to the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, although these are slightly taller with a pointy top. This is the work of Philip Callaghan. He was one of the originators of understanding these earth energies and ancient sites, and there was a connection there back in the 60s and 70s. I highly recommend you check out some of his work. But he found that the towers, anything that's shaped like that, a sort of slightly phallic object, the standing stones are as well, they draw energy down into the land and kind of charge the land around it. And so this is another one of the simple technologies to do with geometry of the ancients. And another aspect which I find particularly interesting is the whole rock dust phenomenon. This is actually the type of rock many of these sites are built with, is actually highly nutritional. I'm not suggesting you start eating gravel for breakfast or anything like that, but there's nothing wrong with licking a megalith. Don't pin it on me if you get stopped by the police or anything. Yeah. But the actual rock dust. I actually drink rock dust. You can crush it up. You can get it from proper companies that make it. They get basalt rock and different types of rock into a dust, a very fine dust, and you actually drink it in water, and it's really high level kind of nutritional value. And so if you think about it, all these megalithic sites are made of this rock. Obviously when they're quarrying and cutting them and placing them, there's lots of dust. And you put that in the ground when you're growing food, right? All the microbes and the worms and all this kind of stuff actually feed all the rock dust, the 70 or 80 minerals that are in the dust, in the rock, into the soil, into the foods, into that, and it actually enhances the nutritional value. And it's only since the 1950s, really, maybe the 40s, when they bought, I don't know if it's the same in America, but in England they bought NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and that was the main kind of fertilizer that was being used. And they just missed out 67 other minerals, and suddenly all our food only had 3 minerals in it, rather than the 70 minerals you get naturally in mineral-rich growing environments. And so to balance that back up, all you've got to do is sprinkle rock dust on your garden, on your allotment, and you're going to get 70 minerals back in. And incidentally, that's when the cancer rate started rising, after they removed 67 minerals from our diet. So there's something to be said for getting minerals back in, and I think the megaliths and the megalithic cultures did this, as well as growing their food effectively. There's also, you get the magnetic charge off the stone as well. So even just by having stones, in your garden and things, you get them, if they're magnetic, if they're positively or paramagnetic, you get a charge that goes through the plants and enhances the energetic structure and the strength and the vitality of the plants as well. But the dust is important because it actually brings nutrients back into the food. So there's a lot to be said for that. There's also, you can put pockets of rock dust around your garden in like a configuration, similar to as Alana Moore did back in Australia. it will actually reorganize the telluric energies. And this has all been tested over and over again. It's all happening. There's more scientific tests being done on this, but the invisible world is now becoming more visible with these kind of this kind of understanding. And so you get into, when you get into this kind of subject, you're looking at the energy effects of these particular sites. You really have to consider the ancient legends and the folklore, especially the one I know. I've collected hundreds and hundreds of stories of fertility at ancient megalithic sites, and different levels of fertility and, you know, fecundity and all these different types of things. Here's just a couple of examples here. You know, this is what, again, I think Freddie mentioned this Men-an-Tol stone last night, when you pass the baby through it several times and you get, you know, effects like this. And so there's certainly something to consider here. Why are there hundreds, if not tens of thousands, of legends and folklore to do with fertility, to do with megalithic sites, if there isn't something actually to do with that as to why they were built? Why would these legends keep up? They're not stupid, these people. So I think there's something in that we have to consider. You even get one of these in Jefferson, New Hampshire. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. Anyone been to this stone? One on the bottom right here? No? Does it still exist? I mean, Jason, do you know if that one still exists on the bottom right, the Jefferson, New Hampshire stone, Men-an-Tol?
I think that was demolished.
Demolished.
People would know that.
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it'd be good if anyone's got any more research on that one. It'd be interesting. This came from Manitou book as well. I wonder if there's the same legends were associated with that. And here we in England, these are some ancient hill figures. Just coincidentally, amazingly, it looks like sort of cartoon character, the one on the left. But he's holding up a Men-an-Tol, which I thought was quite interesting. And obviously, he's holding a club and he looks quite excited. But this is the sort of fertility symbolism you get. You get this in England, you get this in different places, and it's all sort of taboo subject now, having pictures like this up on your screen at a conference. However, this is about fertility. And the energies, the earth energies around this particular hill figure are pretty powerful, especially in one particular area. I've not been up there myself, but I know other people who have, and they've actually got busy up there and got babies soon afterwards. So, because there is something to do with just the sort of symbolism of fertility going on as well. It has a powerful effect, the geometry of it almost. And you get the same things happening all around the world, and all this folklore kind of talks about this. And there's nothing to be shy about. And again, if we head further south into the Scilly Isles, right at the tip of Cornwall, right near the end of the St Michael line, this is just some research that came from the Dragon Project, which was instigated by Paul Devereux and others back in the late 80s. And again, this is very granite-rich land, and they noticed that where these granite pockets were and where granite had been placed, the crops would grow better, the natural plants would grow bigger and stronger. And so even radioactive energy from granite can have a positive effect. It can also have a very negative effect as well, and it can actually cause, as we know, cancer and other things. But anyway, so that's just an outline, really, of the science of earth energies and what's been developed and what the brief history of it, really. There's much more to come on this over the next few years, I'm sure, and many more tests are going to be carried out. I look forward to that. Now, I want to move on to a more global kind of idea, something that Tor has talked about in his film, The Rainbow Serpent Project, and also Freddie mentioned it, and obviously Glenn and Cameron were talking about the St Michael line. Now, when you get into these particular alignments, I mean, when I first saw this image here of this great energy system across southern England, I immediately assumed it's global. It has to be. That cannot just be in England. It has to stretch both ways around the planet. And this is the work of Robert Kuhn, Tor's work on the Rainbow Serpent. It is a global phenomenon. And I wonder if these fertilizing energies, these kind of energies we've been talking about, actually were manipulated globally because they realized they could sort of create a whole system around the planet to work with these. And this is something that I've been looking into for the last few years. This just shows you the basic, it's not really relevant actually, but this just shows you the basic where the line goes here. The lighter lines are the classic UV. Context here, but you can see the purpose of this in my Earth Grids book. Anyway, this shows you the basic alignment here. And I think perhaps one thing I should mention before we move on is another thing that happens with these fertilizing energies at megalithic sites. Where these energies occur, it seems to be, it has an effect on consciousness as well. This fertility energy has an effect on consciousness, and you can get quite extreme altered states if you go at a certain time of day, certain time of year, and actually get this particular effect. And people have noted that with magnetism, sort of magnetic areas where there's a high charge there, and it actually affects the pineal gland. And that can give you sort of very strange effects. We'll get into a couple of ideas about that as we go through the talk. But here's the basic image of the global version of the Michael and Mary line, or the Rainbow Serpent. And Tor's got all the sort of details, and he's been to all these sites. I've been to a few of them, especially the one down in South America over on the left there, the second chakra, Lake Titicaca. And the ones up in the, I'm mainly interested in the Americas. This is kind of what I'm sort of studying at the moment. And I'm just interested in whether these lines are actually global alignments, or if they're just energy lines that happen to fall in, similar places. Here's another version of it, just from a different side of the world, and the chakras. And it's something that Tor's pointed out in this film, is the idea of an Ouroboros, and the way that the serpent eats its own tail. And this is what seems to be happening with these energies. They're like permanently moving around the planet. They just don't stop. It just shows you some of the symbolism here that goes through many, many different cultures all around the world. I think this is linked to the earth energies personally. This is my kind of take on it, that there's a direct link to earth energy symbolism when you start getting into anything to do with serpents, dragons, Lung Mei energies, and many different things. And there was a serpent culture, which we're going to have a look at shortly, which I believe were responsible for this, and they're the ones that termed it and called themselves it as well. It just shows you some other examples here. You get the same, obviously, in Norse mythology, and it's just Norse mythology, and these are just some other ones from different cultures around the planet. So this rainbow serpent thing really interested me. Tor really, was instrumental in getting me sort of vibed up about this, and this idea of global currents and earth chakra points. And I thought, wow, I want to get out to some of these sites and see if I can find these earth energies with my dowsing rods and my little magnetometer I've got, and see what I could come up with. So obviously I've been through England rather a lot, checking out all the sites that Glenn and Cameron showed us yesterday. But interestingly, so we know that there's like two great energy currents weaving around each other, like weaving around a straight line alignment, like a ley line. Yeah, but the way Robert Kuhn looks at it, and he's this visionary kind of antiquarian who was doing this work even back in the 60s and 70s. He believes that it's not like that. His take on it is that these energies are like a beam of energy that are up to 40 kilometers wide, that stretches all around the planet. And he relates this to, he's found that shorter lines of these energies are like thinner, and it all depends on how long the line is as to how thick they are. So if it goes all the way around the world, it's going to be about 40 kilometers wide, which doesn't quite kind of make sense to me, but it makes sense on a certain level that, because you think about it, the world is so large that these energies would be very wide and very thick as such. And so he just shows you his version of it as it goes through Britain. And it's very close to the St Michael axis, as you can see. And the whole area, the DC area down there, 17, 18, 5, 6 and 7, that's a whole area between Glastonbury and Shaftesbury in England. He continues this up through the northern sort of Europe area here. And this is where kind of goes through, and all the numbers there are different ancient sites that are kind of marked upon this particular beam of energy, this rainbow serpent energy, as it goes around. Just let you have a look at that for a second. And this is where it goes through Latvia and then into Russia and Lithuania. Many, many sites there, too many to mention. And this just shows you the kind of the global version of it, the original kind of map that Robert Kuhn did. So we're going to take a little trip down to the South America here, because I was very interested in the one over there on the left, sort of right over on the second chakra, Lake Titicaca, because this is where two of the lines meet, these two great energy lines. There's the main one, which is the rainbow serpent that goes up through England, and there's the other one that goes the other way around. They're like two great hoops, or two great Ouroboros that go around the world, and they meet at two places. I haven't been to the one down here yet, but I have been to the one down in Lake Titicaca. And this is a map me and my friend Sean Kerwin came up with. Well, after I've been there, I've done a bit of dowsing there. So if you extend the straight line, St. Michael line around the planet, it does seem to go through exactly the middle of the island of the sun on Lake Titicaca. You can see that the light blue line that going through the centre there. Now that surprised us somewhat, because if that's the case, then like you get in England, which Hamish and Paul Broadhurst put together, then there should be two energy lines, like the Michael and Mary lines, weaving around it somehow. That's what should be there, if it does go around the whole planet, speculatively. So I went there with that in mind and thought, okay, let's see what we find here. So I started way up the north part of the island, and we got dropped off there from Copacabana, the Bolivian side. And this is the site that greeted me. It's like a small dolmen, like a perfectly cut sort of rectangular megalithic block with a little dimple on top of it. And I thought this was particularly interesting because underneath it is a massive piece of rock, like a megalithic chunk, and there's a huge megalithic kind of cut, sort of weirdly cut polygonal boulder just around the corner. It seems to be an ancient temple was on this part of the island originally, and these are just the remnants of it. And the Michael energy line I found goes straight through this. And so it does seem to, it does seem to be evidence that it does go around the world. And this, I found out later, is one of the Omphali, or the centre of the world of the Inca culture. You also get a different centre at Cuzco, but I believe this may have been the earlier culture because it was from the lake Titicaca, which is the highest lake in the world at like 4,000 metres, that Viracocha, or the great gods of ancient Peru and Bolivia, he emerged from the lake. He was called the foam from the sea. He emerged on what appears to be some kind of raft made of serpents with his band of followers, and started teaching the arts and sciences to all the peoples of that part of the world. And so I believe this was a Viracocha temple dedicated to him. And incidentally, it's also where the energy lines cross. He just happened to emerge there where they cross, which I thought was interesting. Again, we're standing on the energy line, the Michael energy line here. And in the background, people have given me various different interpretations. I thought it was a big frog effigy. If you squint your eyes, you can kind of see this sort of frog-type figure. But underneath the chin of the frog is where the the other energy line and the Michael line cross, and they meet there from a global perspective. And that's where offerings are being made of seeds and grains and other things, suggesting what we looked at earlier, that they were putting it there to fertilise and power up their food source. But also probably from a more spiritual perspective, because you're kind of connecting all around the world by just standing here. You're connected to all these sites, all these cultures around the entire planet. On the south part of the island, this is where the Mary energy current goes through. And these are some famous Inca steps. And in the background there, you've got the island of the moon. So this just shows you the map again, and you can kind of see where the energies go. At the top part of the island, the red line, that's the Michael energy line, and the bottom part is the Mary energy line. And the dark blue line, going from top left to bottom right, that's the plume serpent energy current, the other one that we looked at earlier. And so we seem to have evidence that there's some kind of global phenomenon taking place here. So Viracocha, very interesting chap. I'd love to meet him and his band of followers, because you get the same stories from different parts of the world. This kind of really inspires me, this. I'm finding it tough to get my head around this. But you get the same stories in Egypt with Thoth and possibly Osiris, Sumeria with Enki, even in Ireland you have the Fomorians and the Tuatha De Danann and things like this. In Mexico you have Quetzalcoatl or Cuculclan, and in Peru, Bolivia, we have Viracocha or Contiki or Viracocha. And also you get similar stories on Easter Island, even in Hawaii. Lots of different cultures have these, where these great civilizers appeared from the sea, often coming from the east, like the Atlantic. With their band of followers, they often had serpent symbolism. They were very tall, they had long beards, bright eyes, pale skin. They wore robes, and they taught how to be peaceful. They even taught vegetarianism, and they taught how to megalithic construction, how to live in societies, and basically cultural things, you know, on to a very high level. And Viracocha has been revered and remembered in that part of the world for thousands of years. And so whether it was a real person or whether it was a legend is still up for debate, but there's a huge amount of evidence to suggest that they were real people and they were building these sites. It was also said he could summon lightning and thunder from the sky, and that energy would levitate blocks of stone to help build the temples. And so there's a lot to be said for that. But interestingly, if you track where these energy lines go around the world, you often find the same legends. So it seems like there was some connection that these people back in prehistory were working with these energies on a global scale, manipulating and harnessing them, and so that's why these energy lines are there. Or there could be some other reason, which we're going to sort of explore as we go through this. Here's just some other images of Viracocha emerging from Lake Titicaca on a raft of serpents. You get the same thing in Mexico, mind you. On the right-hand side there, you can't really see this, but that's actually supposed to be the face of Viracocha in the rocks, like a simulacra, if viewed from Ollantay Tambo. It's really hard to see that. I can't really work out where exactly it is, but I've been told that's the case. Anyway, if we head north and we follow the path of the plumed serpent north, we get into Mexico and Guatemala. And this is roughly where the energy line appears to go. This is the other energy line, not the rainbow serpent, the other one, the other hoop that goes around the world. We'll have a look at that shortly, but this is like, so we're looking at this one here. Let me just, this one going around here. And it goes up. All the way through the Americas. So here's just a close-up of roughly where it goes. Now I first was particularly, yeah, can I have the pointer please, Jeffrey, that'd be good, thanks. Thanks very much, cheers. Okay, that's right. Okay, I don't actually know how it works, but what do I do? Oh, there we go. Wow. It's like an invisible button on it. Brilliant. So yeah, so this is where I came in, and this is actually, well, not where I came in, sorry, this is where I visited. This is where Viracocha came in, Quetzalcoatl came in. Let's not get confused here. So this is the whole Gulf Coast region of Mexico, where the great oil spill has unfortunately taken place recently. Now this is the area where the Olmecs were as well, and this is something that particularly interests me, this whole area. You've got some very interesting sites around here. You've got La Venta, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Tortuguero, which I think John Major Jenkins will talk about a bit later. Palenque, obviously, is quite famous. But there's lots of other little Olmec sites in this whole area here. It's really the Olmecs of this part of the world that fascinate me. Because they seem to be linked with these kind of feathered serpents, like Quetzalcoatl and Cuculclan of this particular area. And so we saw the legends of Viracocha and how they all link together down in Peru and Bolivia. But you get exactly the same stories in Mexico and Guatemala and Belize, Honduras, that whole area. We have the same thing. We have the same symbolism, the same look, the feathered serpent, the civilizer gods who appear. They were tall, fair-skinned, they sort of glowed in the dark almost. And they kind of looked a bit like Jesus as well, as you can see on the bottom right here. You know, so there's like a lot of people think they were even Christian missionaries going to different parts of the world, but this is obviously way before that. And interestingly, a lot of the books, the old books of the Maya and down in Peru, kind of have, they're very similar stories to what you get in the Bible to do with Jesus and other things. This is the pyramid of, this is from the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl at the top there. At Teotihuacan. This is just some other symbolism of him. But they really did have an inspirational effect on the cultures of these parts of the Americas. I actually went to Coatzacoalcos, where Quetzalcoatl was supposed to have emerged from the sea. He came in again on a raft of serpents. And Coatzacoalcos actually means serpent sanctuary. Do excuse that photo. But I just wanted to prove I was there. Yes. Yeah. So this is the area here, right on the sort of southern part of the Gulf Coast. The thinnest part of Mexico you got there, apart from that bit there. And so he emerged and came in from the east into Coatzacoalcos. Some stories, the later Mayan stories, say he came in on the Yucatan area, but I believe this was the original sort of legendary story where he came in. And this is where, just down the road from there, or just down the energy line from there, you have Venta, which is a particularly interesting site. It's one of the only, really the only Olmec site you can really visit and actually see stuff. There's other sites you can get to. They're really difficult to get to, most of the Olmec sites, but there's not much left. They've just got a few megaliths and statues and things like this. But here is one of the most impressive places that I've ever been to in my life. Supposedly the first pyramids of Central America. This shows you potentially what it looked like a fluted cone pyramid. And there's also this area where they had toys with wheels on, going back 2000 BC, which is particularly interesting considering they didn't use it to get around and they just made toys out of it. Which I thought was nice. And you can start to see the features of the faces here aren't local. This is sort of African-looking features. And here's the pyramid sort of mound, which looks very similar to Silbury Hill when you go and visit it. This just shows you some of the great Olmec heads. This is where the energy line goes through, the plume serpent energy line, and some basalt columns that are associated with it. They found these pavements, these serpentine pavements under the ground at Venta, going back about, I think, 20 or 30 levels. It's like a cube of serpentine that came in from different parts, and they buried it completely. These amazing pavements, some of them got discovered, thank God, but these are right on the energy line, right on the plume serpent energy line, precisely. And then you can see these elongated skull jadeite figurines, which are actually found within the ground there. And you can see they don't look particularly local. They look kind of have an African look to them, even an Oriental look to them, some of them. And they have the elongated skulls, which is something that keeps coming up over the last few months, the importance and the discoveries that are being made all around the world, this race of longheads. You may laugh, but, you know, imagine if I had one like that. And so this is the mound here, and this is you know, at a glance, it looks like Silbury Hill. It looks like some of the mounds that you get in North America, obviously. And also we have this Egyptian-looking figure here. You get a lot of Egyptian iconography in the Olmec carvings, a lot. It's surprising. Here's one of the altars at the back of Venta. And again, we do have serpent symbolism on here as well. I can find the button. All around here is I've got a close-up of this we'll have a look at in a minute. Beautiful. I happened to go there when it was raining. But if you go to Villa Hermosa, which is the main town nearby, you go to Venta Park, and all the stones and sculptures and statues have been moved from there to Venta Park because the whole Gulf Coast is an oil-rich area, and most of the sites have been destroyed because of oil, to be honest with you. And then obviously the oil spill as well has happened there. And he just shows you some of the statues from Venta. I just want to give you a quick guided tour of some of the sites. You've got this flying dude here with a helmet on pointing at someone. And this is like their burial chambers. And one of the classic Olmec heads, again very African looking. Some people, Graham Hancock compared this face to the Sphinx face, saying how remarkably similar it was. But it was this one here really got me, yeah. This is the one that absolutely stunned me and blew me away. Because this was, although it was moved from Venta, the original site, this is exactly where the plume serpent energy current went through. It went directly through this kind of altar, or whatever it is. And it still had charge in it when I went to visit it in Venta Park. Somehow the energy must have built up there. And actually, if you go back to the site, you can see at the spot where it was, it had two other energy lines all meeting right at this altar. And interestingly, you can see this here is like holding down this serpent on the ground, or this snake. And then here, there's four serpents coming in here, if you can see the heads. And then you get different things up here as well. And when we approached this, we were about maybe 20 feet away from it, maybe 15 feet away from it. My friend Ivan Orozco, he was sort of helping me try and find all the sites around the Olmec land. And we approached it, and we felt this force field around it, this energy field, and it was really nice energy, but it was really powerful. And you know, you could actually sort of put your hand through it and back again. And you could see, and you walk into it, and you kind of felt this heightened sense of awareness. Around the whole, 10 feet around the whole altar, there was this energy field, and we really felt it. And it was one of the most significant moments of my life to do with the megalithic sites. So that really stunned us. We had no idea how or why that could have happened, whether it was just exactly the right time to be there or what it was. But it just proved to me that these sites are still alive, they still function, they still have the energy that the ancients were working with. And it gave me more of an insight into what we're dealing with here. And this is why all this serpent symbolism is on here, because they were working with these energy lines around the planet, whether it was fertility purposes, whether it had a different purpose, whether it had a sort of consciousness expanding purpose, we don't know. But this is something that's obviously been talked about over the last day or two, and we're going to get more into that as we go through the weekend. It just shows you, yes? Here? Oh, sorry, yes, I missed that. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. This is around this side of the, carved on this side. This is about 4 feet high, 5 feet high maybe. Right on the other side of this is this is like a goddess figurine. Sorry, I didn't put the head in there. And this is her arm, and it turns into a serpent, and then it comes around here. Like the goddess is creating the serpent, probably a symbol of the earth or whatever. And then it comes around here, and then this guy, this priest, geomancer dude, is holding it down onto the ground, like trying to control the serpent energies, a bit like you get with, you know, the dragon, St. George and the dragon and things like that. So that's my interpretation of it. It could be completely wrong, of course, but it's worth having a look at that. And you get a lot of just serpents pointing at him as well, which I find particularly interesting. But yes, an amazing piece of basalt, that beautifully carved, and some of the stonework there is so impressive. It's up there with the granite stonework and the diorite stonework of the Egyptians. It's awesome. It's so worth going to have a look. This is one of the classic Olmec heads. Definitely not a native Central American. Definitely has African, Western African look about it. Anyway, I'm just sort of divulging into various bits of my travelling experience here. But this is where the plume serpent energy line goes, and it does seem to follow the path of where supposedly Quetzalcoatl and others moved. But Quetzalcoatl went to a lot of places. He spread out, and his followers and peoples went throughout Central America. And some say he even went into South America as well. So potentially we're looking at the same group of people as the Viracotchans. But anyway, this Tortuguero, I'm just going to mention this because obviously John Major Jenkins is going to look at this later, but I actually went to visit Tortuguero, and the reason this site's so important as we approach 2012 is because it's the only carved stone in the Maya world that actually has the 2012 date on it, or Fort Ahau. So I actually went there. Jeff Stray sort of made me go there, my colleague and bus driver friend, who's also a top author. And this is a sort of outline of what it means. There's more interpretation since then. This is a while ago I did this. And here's a picture of it. I actually went to Villahermosa Museum where it was supposed to be stored, and they wouldn't let us in because it was getting reconstructed. But we got there, and the whole site had been demolished by the army 12 years ago. Luckily, it had been, the main things had been taken out, 30 or 40 years before that by the archaeologists. But we went there, we got chatting with the locals, they showed us some figurines that had been discovered there. We had a good search around for it. Couldn't find any trace rubble we found, and it had been demolished. The army, why would they go in there and demolish it? So that's the Mexican army. So that's particularly quite bizarre, but we had to go and find out anyway. And Palenque, yeah, obviously we had the plume serpent energy goes through here. There's lots of serpent symbolism, many other things. It's a much later culture than the Olmecs, obviously, but it just I wanted to mention that. He just shows you some of the megalithic blocks that are actually at Palenque. There's not many of them. Only in the main plaza, interestingly, where the plume serpent energy line goes right through is where the biggest megalithic blocks are. And also it goes through the tomb of Pakal. So we're going to have to draw to a close shortly, yeah. But I just wanted to give you a sort of, just sort of speculate as to some ideas about these earth energy currents on a global scale. Because, obviously there's the work of Beth and Freddie and others who are looking at it from a global perspective as well, like earth grids and global connections around the planet. And I really believe that's the case, and I've covered that in my survey of all these theories in my Small Earth Grids book, and try to sort of put it all together into one little package as such. But I like the idea, and I'm working on the idea, and I'm in the early stages of research of seeing if these global energies were actually manipulated by mankind in prehistory to help us, from a personal scale to a cultural scale, but also on a global scale. Because it does seem like these energies actually help balance the Earth out. And many people suggest, many researchers have come to this conclusion, that the megalithic sites are actually like not just acupuncture points on the planet to balance up the energies, but they actually like stabilize the earth. Like the sheer weight of some of these stones and megaliths and pyramids. I mean, imagine the weight of the Great Pyramid. I mean, millions of tons probably. So it just suggests that they had a purpose, a global purpose in mind, and there's proof of that when we look at all the maps and we look at the legends and the folklore around the world, that there was something going on prehistory that is benefiting us today and will continue to benefit us as we move into the future. And luckily, we're getting the benefits of that now by the renaissance that's happening in this field of research, really in the earth mysteries and the megalithic research. And just to finish up, here's just a couple of other examples of some global ley lines, really. This is the one that was put together by Robin Heath, a friend of ours back, and he worked extensively with John Michel. This bit here, this is like the alignment between Stonehenge and the Preseli Bluestone site in Wales, where some of the stones from Stonehenge came from. And if you extend that line, it goes all the way around the world. It goes through Delphi, Giza, Mecca. It goes through the Ohio Serpent Mound, interestingly. Comes back through many of the Sligo sites in Ireland, and then comes back down to Wales again and meets back up at Stonehenge. And this is a formidable one. This is like it looks like it's another equator that was found by Jim Allenson. It goes through Nazca, Machu Picchu, Tasali, Giza, Ur, Angkor Wat, Easter Island, and many others. And that's a perfect alignment around the whole planet. And so we keep finding these as we go along. Different researchers are finding different examples of this. And it does seem like there was a global megalithic culture that was working for the good of all, for future generations too, which we're benefiting from today. But also because they had to, and they foresaw what was coming, and we're part of that process now. And I think I'm very grateful to be a part of this kind of megalithic renaissance which is happening, and a lot of us have a passion for it. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate your time. Cheers.